Recording. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Please feel free to interrupt me at any time if you have questions, and I'll pause a couple times for questions if you need me to stop talking. But please feel free to interrupt. It's not a big deal at all. Okay, so we are here to talk about how to make your LinkedIn profile awesome. Not to say that it's not already awesome, but I find that most people generally could have some room for improvement, right? So how do you take your LinkedIn profile from average to extraordinary? That's really what we're here to talk about. So let's see here. Whoops, double click. Okay, so first of all, for those of you who don't know me, a little bit about me. My name is Sue Serna. I grew up in Philadelphia, so I am a native East Coaster, but I now live in the Midwest because my husband's from the Midwest. We live in the lovely Twin Cities outside of Minneapolis, and we've been here for about 10 years. For the first 10 years of my professional career, I was actually a reporter. I was a business reporter for daily newspapers. I covered retail, I covered the economy, and I covered consumer trends, which actually is super helpful working in social media. So, I feel like my experience as a reporter has helped me a lot kind of transitioning to a social media professional. And then for the last 8.5 years, I was on the social media team at Cargill, which is the largest private company in the United States, for those of you who don't know. Cargill has a very robust social media program. We had grand total 360 channels across the globe, everywhere from here to China. And my team was kind of on top of all of that, setting the standards, setting the governance, doing training, doing the corporate level social. So I have a very wide, vast knowledge of kind of all areas of social, which comes in really handy. And then after I left Cargill earlier this year, I decided to go out on my own, and I launched Serna Social, my own company, my own brand, which has been super interesting and exciting. I'm working with clients, including Charles Schwab, and having a really good time doing it. So this was an idea I had as a way to just give back to others, people who are searching for a job or people needing help with social media. I figured that this would be a good way to do something that would help people hopefully do social media better. So that's me in a nutshell. And so we're here to talk about LinkedIn. So this presentation has 2 sections. One is kind of 5 basic tips, and the second section is 5 more advanced tips, right? So again, please feel free to stop me anytime if you have questions, okay? So we're gonna do 5 basic tips for your LinkedIn profile first. So first of all, let's just talk about LinkedIn in general and set some ground rules, right? So what is LinkedIn? LinkedIn is the professional social media network. It's the one you use for work, in other words. It is intended for staying connected to your work contacts, your professional industry contacts. It is not Facebook, right? It is really important now, I feel like, because of COVID, right? We're all kind of stuck behind the camera in our own homes for the most part. So staying connected and having the opportunity to connect with new people without having to meet them in person or go get a coffee, I feel like LinkedIn is actually more important than it used to be super honest. I think it is something that people will lean on more to try to stay connected, especially as COVID kind of drags on. I pulled this straight from the LinkedIn website, right? Their vision is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. Their mission is to connect the world's professionals to make them more productive and successful, right? And there are now 722 million people with a LinkedIn profile across the globe in 200 countries. So it's the biggest network that you could possibly have, and you should view it that way, right? What LinkedIn is not, if I can get my mouse in the right place, is the place where you post pictures of what you ate for dinner unless you're making a point that's related to your work or your profession. It is not the place where you post personal pictures of you at a party, unless maybe it's a work party, right? It is not the place where you post things where you are not being professional in either your appearance or your behavior, and it is definitely not Tinder. I have actually been hit on LinkedIn. Don't do that. It is not the place for that. Bottom line, if it's not workplace appropriate, it does not belong on LinkedIn, right? So that's the key difference for me for LinkedIn. Now, if you are the type of person that needs a little kind of thought starter if you're thinking, I want to update my social media profile, I would work your way through this list of questions, right? Think about what you want to present to the world in terms of your professional self, right? Anyone that is interested in learning more about you, or someone who potentially is interested in hiring you, is probably going to check out your LinkedIn profile. And so that's where you really want to think about, what image do I want to project on my LinkedIn profile? What do I want to declare that I am known for? What do I want to say that I am an expert in, right? All of those things matter for a lot of reasons. But, in the interest, or in the context of finding a new job or getting hired, it really, really matters that you present the image that you want to present. It's the same as going for a job interview, right? You dress appropriately, you put on your best face, you think about how you would answer certain questions ahead of time. It's the same exact thing. You just are doing it in a digital format, right? So do spend some time thinking through what is the image you want to project on your LinkedIn profile. And I find that sometimes people are not great at tooting their own horn, especially here in Minnesota, where people tend to be a little modest. So if you're having trouble, I find that it's really helpful to go look at your last couple performance reviews, because your supervisor probably used some words to describe your work. And that can also be a good kind of memory jog for, oh yeah, I worked on that project and that was really important. I could put that on my digital resume, right? So if you're having trouble, or you're not a writer by trade and you don't like writing, I might say start with your couple past performance reviews and see if that helps kind of get your thoughts going. But I would highly recommend just sitting down and spending some time thinking through, what is the image that I want to project to people, to present my professional self to the world on LinkedIn, right? Okay, so tip number 1, your profile picture. For folks who aren't versed in social media, it can be really confusing to understand, like, what does it mean when you say profile picture, or what does it mean when you say cover photo, which is the next thing we're going to talk about, right? So for the record, your profile picture is the one in the circle, right? It's the one that theoretically should be your head. And it is the one that probably matters the most, if we're being honest, right? So your profile photo is the same as on Facebook or Twitter. It's the small icon type photo that appears at the top of your profile page. It appears next to everything you post, right? So really important that you pick a good picture. Really important that you pick a picture that is recent enough that it actually looks like you. I've seen a lot of photos of people that seem like they were taken in like 1982. Don't do that. You want a picture that represents how you look currently, generally, right? If you've changed your hairstyle, if you no longer wear shoulder pads, if you've gone a little gray, right? All those things, right? Pick a picture that's somewhat recent that actually looks like you. Pick a picture where you look professional, but also friendly, right? I've seen a lot of profile pictures where the person looks like, they're about to go litigate some major $1 million lawsuit and they're super serious. Like, I don't personally like those. I feel like your profile picture should be inviting, right? It should make somebody want to meet you, right? So try to pick something where you do look professional. It is LinkedIn, but where you also look like, hey, this is somebody that I might want to work with, right? So professional and friendly. Don't pick a picture where you look like you're trying too hard, though. There's a bit of a balance, right? We have definitely seen profile pictures of people where they get all dressed up in a fancy suit and they just look like they're trying too hard, right? Don't do that, right? You want to appear natural, if that makes sense. You want to appear like you are just kind of like, this is me and I'm going to work, right? So professional, friendly, no, don't try too hard. I know that's a lot to remember. In general, I find that this is just general photo tip, right? In general, I find that it works better if you wear a vibrant color. Don't avoid, sorry, it's early. Avoid wearing things that have really weird, like funky patterns, because those kind of show up weird in photos sometimes. And also remember that the photo's really small, right? So if you wear something, really crazy with a pattern, chances are high that the pattern may not show up the way that it does in real life anyway. So just keep all of that in mind. And finally, make sure that the photo is appropriate for a circle space, right? I've seen some folks who have a profile picture where there's something important in the corners, like their background, and the corners get cropped off because the shape is a circle. So just make sure it's appropriate, an appropriate photo for a circle shape, and that you're not going to cut off the edges, right? Generally speaking, sizing wise, 300 by 300 works really well for any profile picture on social. If you want it to appear really crisp and higher resolution, you might go 1,000 by 1,000. But truly, you don't need it to be big because it's a small photo. Okay. So to demonstrate, I went down in the archive and found like the oldest picture in my phone that represented this idea. So the one on the left is my current profile picture. It was taken like a month ago by my wonderful friend Angela Devine, who is a fantastic photographer here in the Twin Cities. I dress professionally. I look friendly but professional. This is actually how I look, right? As opposed to the other picture, which is from a vacation like 20 years ago where I rolled out of bed, hadn't brushed my hair, wearing a t-shirt. I have different glasses than I did back then. I gained a little weight between then and now, right? That picture is definitely young Sue after a night vacationing. So, that's a photo that I would say definitely not appropriate for LinkedIn. I have definitely seen people who put things on their LinkedIn profile that seem a little more like maybe that should be your Facebook profile picture. But just keep that in mind, right? You are presenting your professional self in your profile picture. So pick a really good picture that is professional, right? So that's profile pics. I'm assuming no questions, but again, stop me if you have them. Okay, second thing, cover photo. This one is confusing to people that are not super versed in LinkedIn. So your cover photo is the big, long, horizontal banner photo that appears behind your profile picture at the top of your page. A lot of people don't even realize that that's a photo and you can edit it. A lot of people think that it's just kind of whatever LinkedIn plunks in there, which used to be this blue network chart thing, and more recently has become this gray triple shaded graphic thing. But a lot of people think that that's just how LinkedIn does profiles, and they don't realize that you can change that background image. For me, this is very prime real estate, right? It's at the top of your profile. It shows up, as you can see, in the box, even when you have, when you're on the home page of LinkedIn and your profile is kind of off on the left in a little box. Your cover photo and your profile photo are shown there too. So it's really prime real estate, and it's also a really good opportunity to show a little bit of personality, right? I do think that LinkedIn profiles, while they should be professional, don't have to be boring, right? And one of the things that I find is showing a little bit of your personality is a really good way to kind of jazz up your profile and make it stand out, right? So first of all, yeah, that's an image, and you can take out the ugly blue network chart or the gray graphic and put in any picture that you want, right? It's a really good place to show a little bit about yourself, right? You can have some fun. It's one of the few places where I'm going to tell you have a little fun. So this is a place where you have a little fun. One thing I will point out is that these photos have to be super horizontal. The sizing is, as you can see, 1,584 pixels wide and only 396 tall. It's really, really horizontal, and important to know that they do not stretch when you put a photo in that spot. So it's not one of those cases where you put a photo in and the software kind of makes it fill the space. What you put in there is what you're going to get. And so you have to find a photo that is super horizontal and works well in that space. So for example, these are the things that you want to avoid: ugly blue network chart or triple gray graphic, right? This is an example of what happens when you put a photo in that does not really fit the space, right? So this one here is a horizontal photo, but it just does not work well in that format, right? It's too tall. It doesn't kind of fit a horizontal space. And as you can see, it cropped off my head because it's too big, right? Same with this one, right? This is a closer up picture. but it's just not horizontal enough, right? It just gets cut off on the top and the bottom, and it just doesn't work in this space, right? And it may be that you have to try a couple pictures before you find the one that really works, right? I definitely have to do some experimenting sometimes to even see if a picture is a good fit for the LinkedIn profile spot. So here are a couple examples of people that did a really good job, right? So this is one of my former colleagues at Cargill. I love her cover photo. It says so much about her. It's really fun. These are obviously the shoes in her closet. She's got her teal pumps and she's got her hockey skates, you know, and I just think it's just so like personal. It's so interesting and it says something about her. You know, a lot of people use the kind of landscape scenic pictures that they take on vacation. That's totally fine. Those tend to work really well in these spaces. But, you know, think about what you could put in this spot, because as you can see, having a real personal image in there is so much more visually interesting than the standard graphic, right? Just so much more interesting. And if you work at a large company, a lot of companies now are providing branded images for their employees to use in this space. So if you work at a big company, I might explore whether such a thing exists for your company or if it's okay for you to make one. But you could certainly, if you want your LinkedIn profile to really scream, I work at Honeywell, like my friend Sarah here, you know, you certainly could do a more branded type image that is specifically designed for that spot. But whatever you do, pick something fun, something that says something about yourself as a person, and try your best to avoid this and this, right? Make sure it fits the space and make sure that it's something that looks, again, professional, right? I don't know why there's a red line there. Okay, so once you get your cover and profile pictures in place, you must remember to actually check what they look like. Because, and this is really important, LinkedIn, unfortunately, is not the most dynamic in terms of the design of the platform. So you will have your profile picture and your cover photo on your main profile page. You'll have it on the box that appears in the upper left-hand corner when you go to the LinkedIn homepage. And then there's also a mobile view, right? And I will tell you that the mobile view is just like slightly different than the other ones. And so you can see I had to do a lot of engineering of where my purple box ended to get it to look right on mobile, right? And it's just a thing you have to play with if you're doing something like this, because it just gets a little funky sometimes. So just make sure that whatever you choose displays well on all three formats, and that you're not, and this is not ideal, I will tell you, you know, that it's not blocking a key part of your image. Just make sure that it looks okay on all three formats. It's a really important note to go check it once you pick the images that you think you want, right? Okay. Third thing, I have no idea why that red line is there. It's driving me crazy, but okay. Fill in your basic information as completely as possible. So this is really basic stuff, but it's really, really important. First of all, make sure that at the top of your profile page, your name, your title, your company are all showing up correctly, right? There's a lot of folks that for some reason don't ever check that, and you know it's wrong, and you don't want it to be incorrect. You want it to be up to date and correct. Second, you can edit your contact info by clicking here on contact info. And you should add as much contact info as you are comfortable sharing, right? I understand certainly if you don't want to put your phone number there. I understand certainly if you don't want to put your personal email address there, right? Because it is public. But if you are comfortable sharing those things, absolutely do it. You do not want to make it hard for people to get in touch with you, right? And you can see that you can also add links to your Twitter account. If you are participating in Chinese social media, there's actually a WeChat account link that you can add. So it provides you with a range of options. Make sure that you at least have one or two ways that people can reach out to you, right? Because again, you don't want to raise the bar in terms of what people have to do to reach you, right? But only share what you're comfortable sharing, right? It's a little bit of balance. It's different for everyone. That red line is going to drive me nuts. Okay. The next section on your LinkedIn profile is called About. And I find that quite often people sell themselves really short here. And it's unfortunate. It really is. I think that the the thing that you should take away is that you should not be shy here. You should write at least 1 or 2 paragraphs. There's no, there may be a length limit, but it's a pretty generous length limit. Make sure you write a couple paragraphs and really toot your own horn. Another question that I get a lot in this space is what tense should you write it in? I personally think that you can write this in first person tense. I think you can say I, right? It sounds weird if you don't say I. I've seen people try to do it in third person. It just seems really weird. So I would say use I, write it in first person, and be a little more broad than just here's what I did or here's what I do, right? It's not a list of 5 things that Sue does, right? It's much more of like, here's my philosophy, or here's how I approach my career, or here's what I am passionate about, right? You can use this space to really expound a little bit on things that make you you, right? It's one of those places on the LinkedIn profile where you can really show some identity, right? And where you can really say, here's what makes me me, and here's what makes me different from other people. So as you can see, I start mine, or maybe you can't see because it's tiny, but I start mine by really talking about why social media is such an important and emerging field and what my philosophy about it is, right? It is, obviously I work in like, hey, I led social media for a giant company and, I have lots of experience, but it's not me just saying that. It's me offering a little more perspective on what makes me tick and what my brain thinks about social media. So really take this space and write yourself a little mini essay about kind of who you are, what you do, why you do it, what your philosophy is, whatever seems right to you, but you can have some flexibility here is my point. And then finally, I would highly recommend everyone do this, and I'm sorry that red line is just driving me bonkers. Core competencies. And as you can see, I just made myself a laundry list of stuff that I do that are skills that I have. And I separated them each by a pipe, that bar symbol. This is the equivalent of keyword stuffing, if we're being super honest, right? This is just me throwing down my giant list of skills and tools and stuff that I know. And it's important because of the way that search works. And we'll talk about search in a second. But, if somebody is out there on LinkedIn looking for a social media strategy expert, right? I increase my odds that they're going to find me by putting those words in my resume, basically, right? And so this is where I would recommend taking part of your about section, not the top of it, but the bottom of it, and just making a list of your core skills, right? Because that will help you when people are searching for people who have those specific skills. So, a little bit of a combo here, do your kind of personal essay about who you are and what you do, and then add a list of core competencies. Make sense? Okay. Then the next section is the part that's kind of like your resume, right? You list your different positions, when you held them, kind of give some details about what you did there. This is another place where people really fall down. I've seen a ton of LinkedIn profiles where they literally just list their job title and the years that they had that job. That's a big mistake. You're giving away, again, some pretty prime real estate. For each job position that you had, you should really, really expound, right? You should really expound on what you did, what you were responsible for, key projects, things that you worked on that you were really proud of, teams that you led, et cetera, right? As you can see here, I wrote some big chunky paragraphs and sentences to really outline what I did. Unlike a paper resume, you kind of have unlimited space here. And that's not to say you should just go on and on and on and on, but you do have room to really expound for each job position. I would highly recommend doing an extended version for your last job position, the most current one, because obviously that's the one that potential employers are going to care a little more about. But really, truly, don't sell yourself short. Again, go back to your performance reviews and pick out, the things that you worked on that you were really proud of. Led a team of people to do this, or, managed a project to do this. Add all of those things in. Again, it helps you with search. but also, you know, you want to give people a full picture of the type of work experience you have, and LinkedIn allows you the space to do it. So don't give up that space. Make sure that you are taking full advantage of it, right? And then finally, a lot of people don't realize that there is an additional thing that you can do in each of these job positions. You can add a link to any multimedia thing out there on the web. So literally, if it has a website address that you can click on, you can add it here to each job position, right? So for instance, if you were interviewed for a news article, you could link to the news article. If you were featured in a podcast as a guest, you could link to that. If you wrote a white paper, if you have a blog post that you think people would want to read, right? Anything that exists on the web and has a web address, you can link to. And not only does that add kind of another layer of information for a potential hiring person, right? It also visually breaks up your LinkedIn page, right? So you don't have all text just clumped together. So it has multiple benefits, and it honestly is a feature that gives you, you know, it's kind of a leg up on your traditional paper resume, because you can't do that in a paper resume, but you can do it on LinkedIn. So definitely, you know, take advantage of the multimedia part of this, where you can add a link to almost anything, right? So for instance, I think this one links to a podcast that I was featured on. This one links to a blog post where somebody called me like a social media rock star, right? You know, like all those things matter. And if you have them, be sure to share them and promote them, right? Okay, and then finally, the additional sections. A lot of times people fill out their work history and then just stop. And that's also a mistake, right? Part of the thing that we've learned over time is that people who are looking at hiring you want to understand as much as they can kind of the complete package. They want to understand who you are as a person. They want to see if you're engaged in your community, right? And so while all of those are kind of softer things to look at than your actual work experience, we know that it matters to recruiters and hiring managers. So of course, make sure you filled out your education, right? You don't just have to limit it to your 4-year degree, right? If you've done certifications and things, or if you've gone off and done supplemental courses, you can add those to your education section. Make sure that you fill out volunteer. And I'm going to say honestly that there is not a great place on LinkedIn to put things like board chair, you know, board experience or volunteer things. I generally coach people to put those under volunteer, even though they're kind of volunteer, right? They're things you do for free, right? So I call them volunteer. So you would put those under here. And then also, if you actually volunteer in your community with an organization, put that here too, because that is something that I think a lot of employers like to see. Is it going to get you the job? No. But, you know, just saying like, this is a person who's engaged in their community, who cares about others, who does something about it. I think all of that kind of adds to the column, right? So if you actually volunteer in your community, make sure you represent that on your LinkedIn profile. Then there's the skills section, right? So some of you have probably gotten notifications that like Sue endorsed you for blah, blah skill, right? That's where these show up. Your skills that you are most endorsed for tend to pop up to the top. But a lot of people don't realize that you can add a skill, right? If there's something that someone hasn't endorsed you for, but you think that you should promote it, you can add it yourself, right? You don't have to wait for somebody to endorse you for it. And also, if you click the edit pencil, you can reorder how these appear, right? So if you're, for instance, I switched from being a journalist to a social media expert. So when I did that, I reordered my skills so that the social media ones came to the top and not the journalism ones, right? So you can actually get in here and muck around with what people see. So make sure you take a look at which skills are there, supplement with ones that you would like to be there, and make sure they show up in the order that makes the most sense for you and the jobs that you're applying for, right? So don't overlook skills, and then don't overlook accomplishments, right? This can be things that you did, like those board positions, right? It can be any honors or awards that you've received. It can be certifications, right? But make sure you fill in as much detail as you can. And then finally, look for the plus sign, which allows you to add another section to your LinkedIn profile. There's lots and lots of options here that people don't realize, right? So If you took some really important certification test and you want to brag about your great score, you can do that. If you want to claim, that you talk, that you can speak like 4 languages, make sure you put that in there. If you have received a patent for something, you can put that on your LinkedIn profile, right? So there's a lot of diversity that people don't realize they can add to their LinkedIn profile, right? So if any of these make sense to you to add to your LinkedIn profile, do it, right? Click on the plus sign, add the section. Long story short, the more detail you can add, the better it's gonna be, right? And I've mentioned it several times, but the more words you put in your LinkedIn profile, especially keywords, skills, things that people would be searching for, the more likely you are that people are going to find you. I mean, it's really that basic, right? People, including recruiters and hiring managers, will go out on LinkedIn and search, right? I need someone who's a social media strategy expert. I need someone who knows how to do social listening. I need someone who understands social media analytics, right? They're searching for those keywords. And the bottom line is, if your profile does not contain those words, you will not show up in the search results, right? So flip your thinking around and make sure you're thinking about it from their point of view. What would somebody be searching for that I should be putting in my LinkedIn profile, right? Okay, those are the 5 basic tips. Any questions so far? No? Okay, so we'll move into more advanced stuff. Okay, so first of all, you can create yourself a custom URL or a custom website address for your LinkedIn profile. If you have not done this yet, your LinkedIn profile link looks something like this, right? LinkedIn.com/in/first name, last name / a bunch of numbers and letters, right? Not ideal, if we're being honest, but you can actually change your own LinkedIn URL. How do you do it? You go to your profile, you click on edit public profile and URL. You'll get a screen that then shows you this box. You click on the edit pencil, and then you can literally edit the back end of that URL to anything you want that someone else hasn't taken, right? So first name, last name with no numbers, some version of that, right? But you can come up with something that's much easier for people to remember that doesn't involve this random alphabet soup, right? And all you have to do is click save, and then that's your new LinkedIn URL. So if you have not done this yet, super easy thing you can do that just makes your LinkedIn profile look more professional, right? So customize your LinkedIn URL. Then think about your strategy, right? And I know that social media strategy is a difficult thing for people. This is really a condensed version of what we do for corporations, brands, etc., right? But in general, for a social media strategy, including your own personal one, I highly recommend people start with, what is my goal, right? What is my goal? And it can be, very specific, I want to generate 12 leads a month, or it can be something a little more vague, right? I want to be a thought leader in my space. But as you can see in these examples, this red line is driving me bonkers. You really want to focus on your goal, because it's going to completely change what you do on LinkedIn, right? So for instance, if your goal is, I want to be a thought leader in my industry, you'd be posting your own commentaries to demonstrate your thought leadership. You would be commenting on other people's commentaries and adding your 2 cents to conversations. You would be trying to demonstrate your thought leadership in all of your activity on LinkedIn. Excuse me. If you wanted to use LinkedIn purely as a networking device and connect with peers at other companies or colleagues that might be able to help you find your next job, you would make a strategy that's really built around making those connections, finding those right people, creating a relationship, right? And then finally, if you're a salesperson, you'd be focused on what we call social selling, right? How do you use social media to sell your widget? Completely different strategy, completely different tactics. So do not overlook this thought process. Decide what you want LinkedIn to be for you, because it will dictate your actions on LinkedIn, right? So think through your strategy. And then if you're feeling like doing something a little more advanced, you can actually start blogging on LinkedIn or writing what LinkedIn calls articles, right? So especially if your goal is to be a thought leader in your space, you should start sharing your advice and your opinions and your expertise on LinkedIn. And the way that you do that is by writing an article. Now, this is a really important distinction that a lot of people don't get. There is a difference on LinkedIn between making a post, which most of you probably know how to do, and writing an article. So a post is a couple sentences usually. It might include a link, right? An article is a long form post. It's like 800 words, 1,000 words, somewhere in there. It's much more like a blog post, what you think of as a blog post. But LinkedIn has a mechanism for doing these right within the LinkedIn platform. So when you go to the LinkedIn homepage, most of you probably have seen this box, right? When you want to make a post, you click in the box and you type. But a lot of people have never noticed this button. It's over there on the side, I promise. And you click on write article. And when you click there, it brings up a kind of scaled down Microsoft Word, right? And you write your headline and you write your copy. You can insert photos and videos and all kinds of stuff. And then you post it, right? And it creates a separate page with a separate web address for that specific blog post that then you can share, right? So here's a couple examples of blog posts that I've done, right? People really, really like hot takes, right? When somebody comes out and says, here's a thing that happened and here's what I think about it, right? Or in the case of this one with the fly and Vice President Pence, I was writing about how the Biden campaign really kind of killed it on social media that evening, kind of taking advantage of the opportunity that the fly afforded them, right? This post was super popular, right? I mean, massive metrics, surprised even me, but it's because it was a hot take. It was hopefully a good hot take, and it was really timely. I posted it the morning after the debate, right? And so people really enjoy when you can be very timely and offer your expert opinion on something that just happened or is happening. Those tend to do really well. The other thing that works really well are these more what we would call an evergreen post, as in it's kind of relevant all the time, where you kind of say, here's 5 tips on whatever, or here's 3 things to think about, or in this case, here are my 5 top social media myths, right? But think about kind of topical things like that you can do, and then think about timely things that you can do. Once you get in the habit of it, and once you've written a couple, the other bonus here is that one of the sections you can add on your LinkedIn profile is this featured section, in which you can highlight blog posts, right? So if you have 3 that you think are really, really good, you could add this featured section to your LinkedIn profile, which is just another way to spruce up your LinkedIn profile and demonstrate expertise, right? So most of you on this call, I'm sure, are experts in your field in some way, shape, or form. And so think about, how can I share that expertise? And am I comfortable putting myself out there like that? If the answer is yes, I would highly recommend doing this. It's really not that hard. Everyone with a LinkedIn profile can do it. And I think you'll be surprised at the traction you get. You know, LinkedIn is the nicest social media platform, if you will. There's not a lot of trolls. There's not a lot of really nasty comments. So it's a pretty safe space to start kind of experimenting. And then if you do these featured blog posts, you can then share the link to them on Twitter or on Facebook or whatever to drive even more traffic, right? But it helps you, especially in that thought leadership category, to really demonstrate that you're an expert in your field by simply writing the knowledge that's in your head, right? So think about writing articles and then think about recommendations. A lot of people do not have any recommendations on their LinkedIn profile, which is really sad to me. A recommendation is simply like, it's like a review on Yelp, right? It's someone that you have worked with in some way saying, I vouch for Sue. She's a fun person to work with. And here's what I have to say about working with her, right? So it could be supervisor, it could be coworkers, it could be people that don't even work on your team, but have worked with you in some way. It could be a client, but you know, there's nothing wrong with asking people to write you a LinkedIn recommendation. They're not long. Most of them are like a paragraph, so it doesn't take a ton of time. When someone submits a review for you or a recommendation, you get the opportunity to review it first, and you can actually ask for changes. If there's something where you're like, could you say this way? Because whatever. If you want to really be nitpicky, you can actually ask somebody to make a revision before you actually post it live. And you always get the opportunity to decide which ones of your recommendations appear at all, right? So you always have control. So it's really a no risk proposition, right? Ask somebody for a recommendation, see what they write. If it seems like something that is going to be positive for you, show it on your LinkedIn profile. The number one way to get recommendations is to give them. People feel very reciprocal about it, right? So if you give someone a recommendation, they are very likely to turn around and give you one back, right? So if you are looking for things you can actively do, you might make yourself a task, right? I'm going to write 3 LinkedIn recommendations for people that I know every week, right? And you'll be surprised how many of them then come back and write one for you, right? You can also just straight up ask for a recommendation, especially if you're in the job seeking category right now. Nothing wrong with going through your good contacts and saying, hey, would you write this for me? It would be really helpful, right? So you can either promotionally ask for them, or you can give them and hope that you get them, right? But try to get a couple good solid recommendations on your profile, because when someone's looking at your profile, again, it just adds to that full picture of who you are as a person and a worker. And to have other individuals kind of say like, yeah, this is a great person to have on your team. The same way a Yelp review feels like, oh, well, real people say it's a good place, so I feel more confident about it. It's the same thing. Real people who have worked with Sue say she's a good person to work with. That makes me feel like, yeah, she's probably a good person to work with, right? So it's not rocket science, but if you have ignored your recommendation section, I highly recommend trying to get at least a couple to kind of spruce it up, right? And if you have recommendations that are like years and years old, try to get some newer ones, right? Okay, and then last one, participate. You have to participate on any social media, but specifically LinkedIn. If you're looking for a holiday reading recommendation, this is one of my favorite books of all time. I had the pleasure of watching Tim Sanders speak once about this book. His philosophy is that the more generous you are with your time and your expertise and your knowledge in your profession, the more it will come back to you. It's basically karma, but in the workplace. But I really truly believe that he's right. The more you give of your time, the more you're willing to coach others, the more you're willing to to show your expertise, take questions, debate things with people, the more you get in return. It's really, really true, but especially on LinkedIn. On all social media, right? Participation is voluntary, right? You don't have to participate, but the more you participate and really become an active part of the conversation, the more rewards you're going to see. The more people are going to notice what you're saying. The more people are going to click through on your profile to see, who is this person? The more people are going to invite you to connect because you seem like a person that they would like to be connected with, right? The more people will ask you to have a 30-minute virtual coffee, right? All of those things that people want from LinkedIn come when you start participating in the conversation. So my number one tip for any social media, but especially LinkedIn, is you can't post and run, right? It's not a like, oh, I'm going to post this and then drop it and walk away and forget about it, right? You want to check back on your posts. You want to see if there's comments. You want to thank people if they share it, because that's a big thing, right? If somebody shares your post because A, they found it so interesting that they themselves liked it and found value, and then B, they wanted to share it with their network so they could get that value, that's a big thing that somebody just did for you. You should thank them, right? You should at least like it. So, it's a lot of, kind of managing the flow, right? But if you post and run away, you will not reap the rewards on LinkedIn or any social media platform. So part of the hurdle is understanding, if you want to get more out of LinkedIn, it's not just sprucing up your profile, it's then participating in the conversation, right? And if you can do that successfully, you will be rewarded with all the things that you want. but you can't just assume that people will find you, right? Again, there's 722 million people on LinkedIn. So standing out is a bit of a feat, right? And the number one way to do that is to just get out there and talk to people, right? It's just the virtual version of that. Okay. Questions. So the number one question is, are you going to share this? The answer is yes. I'm going to post the recording and the PDF version of the slides on my website under webinars. It is actually, the deck is actually already there, and I'll upload the video obviously after we're done here. But you will be able to find the slides for this on my website. They are already there. Who has questions? We have a couple minutes left.
Sue, I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, I actually remember having a conversation with a colleague who had told me that actually she made sure, she had really good results on LinkedIn, just putting in her titles, without getting into skills and descriptions, because that was something where she sort of made recruiters work for it, where they would need to call up and ask her about, what was going on in those positions and that sort of thing. But I'm mindful about what you're saying about search algorithms and everything. But I know that, again, not everybody feels like they can put all of that, history together beautifully. So, I mean, is there sort of a midway point where you feel there's a best of both worlds?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. My personal disposition is like, people aren't going to find you unless you put the words in your profile. I mean, maybe she did something so interesting or so unique that it was not hard to find people that did that just based on the title. Don't know. But I would say, like, especially in the current job market, I want to hedge my bet, right? Like, I'm going to give you more information than you ever wanted, because that's going to maximize the chances that people find me, right? And they understand that, like, whatever it is that they're hiring for, this person can do that, right? It could be that other people feel that's completely unnecessary. I don't know. But that's my honest answer, is like, I would go with more words than less words, but that's just me. That's probably not very helpful. I see a couple questions in the chat. So Andrea asks, tips for putting the title under your name if you are job seeking or currently unemployed. That's a great question. One thing that LinkedIn did, I'm going to jump out of my slides here. One thing that LinkedIn did that I think is actually extremely smart is mouse, where are you? Too many monitors. Okay. Is it added this open to work thing, because there's so many people searching. So if you have not turned on open to work right now, you should absolutely do it. It creates, I can't show you because I'm in the admin view, but it creates a badge that people see that says you're open to work. And then you get the chance to customize that, right? So you can see, like, what type of jobs are you looking for? What geographic areas would you want to be in? Are you available now? And then specifically, what type of work are you looking for, right? Really, really handy for flagging to recruiters that, yes, you absolutely are available. And it's also a visual cue to people, because there's a little badge, right, that appears that you're looking for work. So I would absolutely recommend doing that. And then also, you can, like, in your title section here, which to be clear, it pulls whatever your current job is, right? So it pulls the information from right here. So you could certainly amend your current job position to be something like, freelance social media consultant available for hire or something like that. If you really want to, like, drill it into people's heads, you can make that text appear here by tweaking your current profile. So you could do one or both of those things. Okay, next question. I keep getting emails from LinkedIn about upgrading to premium. Is it worth it? I will say that I've had premium off and on throughout my career. I do find it useful. I particularly find it useful because it tells you more details about job positions that are posted. Like, it'll give you a salary range, and it will tell you kind of like X number of people have applied that have a super senior level, title already. Is it necessary? No. Is it useful? Kind of. I do not currently have it, if that helps you at all. I think it is somewhat interesting, but I also don't think it's necessary to find a job. So really up to you if you want to splurge and spend the money. More data is always better in my opinion, but I also don't think that like knowing the salary range for a job is necessarily going to prevent you from applying for it necessarily if it seems like it's a good fit for a job. So I don't know. Let's see. Next question. Do you recommend posting and commenting cadence in the job search context? Really good question. I try to post to my LinkedIn and my company LinkedIn a couple times a week. You certainly don't have to be that active. I would recommend kind of, you can even, I know people that make themselves a schedule, right? Like I'm going to post one original piece of content a week, and then I'm going to promote it later in the week. And then on the days that I'm not doing either of those things, I'm going to dedicate 20 minutes to going through and liking people's posts and commenting on them and participating in the conversation, right? So it's less about the cadence and more about consistently being active, right? So whatever that looks like for you is the right cadence, right? But, in general, try not to go more than a day or two without doing something on LinkedIn. That's my best advice. Let's see. If you have a side gig like Pampered Chef, Scentsy, or Usborne, I don't even know what Usborne is, should that be included in your profile? I think it's fine. I mean, it depends on what you want people to know about it, right? If you feel like you need to put that in there just to demonstrate that you've been doing something and not just sitting on the couch for however many months it's been, sure, absolutely. It would be even better if you could like somehow create an entry for that side gig that demonstrates some work skills, whether it's organization or event planning or whatever. If you can somehow spin that side gig information into like work skills, that would probably be even better. But I don't think there's anything wrong with putting it on your LinkedIn profile as what you're currently doing. Especially now in the COVID times, I don't think anybody would be like, oh, well, we don't want to hire her because she went off and found a side thing. I think it's fine. And then finally, do you have recommendations for photographers who take headshots and can deliver a properly formatted web-ready image? Oh God, what a great question. Well, I would recommend my friend Angela, who took my headshot. I don't know if you're in the Twin Cities or not, but her company is called the Divine Group, and her name is Angela Divine. If you want, I can send you her details if you want to shoot me an email. But really, truly, I mean, a lot of photographers out there take really great headshots and can give you all the formats you want. Google something like brand photography, not just like wedding photography or whatever. See if you can find someone that really specializes in work professional brand photography. But that's something most photographers should be able to deliver. And if you're in the Twin Cities, absolutely, I'd recommend Angela. She did all the photos for my website, which were amazing. High recommend. So any other questions? Really good questions, you guys. No? Good. Okay. You all are going to get a follow-up email from me. I'll include the link to all the materials too, but you can find them on my website under webinars. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you found it useful, and please let me know if I can ever help you with your social media. Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye. Have a happy holiday, everyone.